It was a chilly October morning in the small town of Fairview, Indiana. The air buzzed with excitement. It was school picture day at Meadow Ridge Elementary. Children laughed and straightened their collars while teachers lined them up by height. 7-year-old Ethan Carter, a quiet, sweet boy with chestnut hair and wide, thoughtful eyes, wore the brand new blue sweater his mother had bought just for the occasion. He was supposed to say cheese and flash his gentle smile for the camera like every other child, but he never got the chance. Somewhere between roll call and the first class photo, Ethan vanished. The school was placed on immediate lockdown. Teachers searched every hallway, closet, and restroom. Police arrived within 20 minutes. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters circled the area. Every inch of the school and surrounding grounds was scanned. But Ethan was gone without a trace. His backpack was still in his cubby. His lunch untouched. His half-filled milk cartons still sat on his desk, slowly turning warm. That picture day was supposed to be a memory for a lifetime. Instead, it became the darkest chapter in the town's history. His mother, Karen Carter, never took down his missing poster. She refused to move houses, refused to change her phone number, clinging to the hope that maybe, somehow, Ethan would return. Years passed, the school eventually closed, the world moved on, till now to 35 years. Later, when a school photographer in another state uploaded an old roll of undeveloped film online for nostalgia. One picture stood out, a class photo from 1988, the last one ever taken at Meadow Ridge. There, in the back row, stood a boy, small, uncertain, but smiling. Now what followed? Reopened wounds, buried secrets, and a mother's unshakable hope would leave the entire country in disbelief. If this mystery already has you hooked, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon. Because the story you're about to hear is not just emotional, it's unforgettable. Let's dive in. Every town has its legends. Some are harmless ghost stories. Others are too real to forget. In 1988, a second-grade student named Ethan Carter vanished from his school on picture day. And despite endless searches, interviews, and even national TV coverage, not a single clue was ever found. Until now. Because 35 years later, something as simple as a smile in an old photo has breathed life into a cold case long buried, and what unravels is a web of lies, a mother's unbroken faith, and the chilling truth about what really happened that day. It was a cold Friday morning in Fairview, Indiana. The sky was gray, and the wind carried the scent of fallen leaves. Inside the Carter home, 7-year-old Ethan was up early, more excited than usual. It was picture day at school, and he had been talking about it all week. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing his soft brown hair just the way his mom had taught him. His mother, Karen Carter, watched from the doorway with a proud smile. She had bought him a bright blue sweater, one size too big, just so he could wear it longer. Ethan didn't mind. He said it made him feel grown up. After breakfast, Karen knelt down, fixed his collar, and whispered, "Smile big today, sweetheart." "I want to frame that picture," Ethan nodded, slinging his backpack over one shoulder and waving goodbye before stepping out the door. At 8:10 a.m., Ethan walked into Meadow Ridge Elementary. His teacher, Mrs. Tilley, marked him present. He hung his coat in the cubby, placed his backpack on the hook, and sat down at his desk like always. He took out a crayon and started drawing quietly, something he often did to calm his nerves. Picture day made him a little nervous, but he was ready. Everyone saw him. Everything was normal, but then something changed. Around 9 a.m., school secretary came over the speaker and called Mrs. Tilley's class to head down for their photos. The kids lined up, giggling and adjusting their clothes. Ethan was in the middle of the line, quiet, eyes down. When they reached the gymnasium, the line moved slowly as the camera crew adjusted their lights and equipment. One by one, the children were called to the stool, smiled and snapped. When it was Ethan's turn, he was gone. At first, no one noticed. The next child just stepped forward. Mrs. Tilley looked around, expecting to see Ethan nearby, maybe tying his shoelaces or standing off to the side. But he wasn't there. Thinking he may have gone to the restroom, she asked one of the aides to check. Minutes passed, then more, and soon panic began to grow. They checked the restroom, empty. The hallway silent. His backpack was still hanging in the cubby. His jacket hadn't been touched. It was as if Ethan had simply disappeared. By 9:30, the school was in lockdown. The intercom called for all staff to check their rooms. Police were notified. His mother was called, but nothing made sense. Ethan had vanished between his classroom and the gym. A walk that took less than 2 minutes. No one had seen him leave. No one had heard a thing. And just like that, on the day he was supposed to smile for the camera, Ethan Carter became a mystery that would haunt Fairview for the next 35 years. When Karen Carter arrived at the school, she didn't even park her car properly. She jumped out and ran straight through the front doors, her heart racing so fast she could barely breathe. Her eyes searched every face, every hallway, hoping to see Ethan standing somewhere. Maybe lost, maybe scared, but alive. She called his name over and over. Ethan, Ethan, it's Mommy. Where are you? But there was no answer. Just the sound of rushed footsteps, walkie-talkies crackling, and teachers whispering in fear. The police were already there. Officers gently asked Karen what Ethan had been wearing, what time he left the house, and if anything strange had happened that morning. But Karen couldn't think clearly. Her hands trembled as she described the blue sweater. He was excited, she kept saying. He was so excited to take his picture today. Outside, a massive search had begun. Police dogs were brought in. Volunteers, including parents and neighbors, formed search teams. They looked through the schoolyard, nearby woods, playgrounds, parking lots, even trash bins. Every bush, every corner, every locker was opened. But there was no sign of Ethan. Flyers were printed within hours. His little face, smiling innocent, was plastered on every wall, every telephone pole, every shop window in town. The local news picked up the story that evening. Karen stood outside the school holding Ethan's picture, her voice shaking as she spoke into the cameras. Please, if anyone has my son, bring him home. He's just a little boy. He's scared of the dark. Please. The days that followed were the longest of Karen's life. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. She would sit in Ethan's room for hours, hugging his pillow, whispering prayers and begging God to send her baby back. Every time the phone rang, her heart stopped, hoping it was someone calling to say they'd found him. But it never was. Tips came in. Strange cars seen near the school. A man at the gas station acting weird. A child spotted at a rest stop 2 states away. But every lead went cold. Nothing connected, nothing helped. Karen refused to give up. Even when detectives started using words like abduction and possible foul play, she held on to hope. She said she could still feel Ethan, that he was alive somewhere. But the town slowly grew quiet. News vans left, police presence faded. And soon, life around her returned to normal, while Karen remained stuck in the nightmare. She left the porch light on every night, just in case he found his way back home. The days turned into weeks, then months, then years. Karen Carter never moved out of the little white house on Maple Street. She couldn't. Every room still held a piece of Ethan. His shoes by the door, his drawings taped to the fridge, his favorite toy truck resting near the couch. She couldn't bring herself to pack anything away, because to her, packing up meant accepting he was never coming back. And she wasn't ready for that. She never would be. She kept his bedroom exactly the same. The bed sheets with the rocket ships, books on the shelf. Even the tiny blue sweater, the one he wore the day he vanished, was folded carefully inside his dresser. She would go in sometimes, sit on his bed, close her eyes, and whisper, "I miss you, baby." That room remained frozen in time. Like Ethan had just stepped out for a moment, and any second now he'd come running in asking for cookies. But he never did. As years passed, the case lost attention. Detectives retired. Reporters stopped calling. New tragedies took over the headlines. The missing posters faded in the sun. Some neighbors stopped asking. Some moved away. Others gently told Karen, maybe it's time to let go. But Karen couldn't. She refused to believe that her son simply vanished off the face of the earth. She went to therapy, but nothing helped. Her world had stopped spinning that October day, and no one truly understood her pain. People pitied her. Some avoided her. Others whispered cruel things like maybe she knows more than she says. But Karen ignored it all. She didn't care what people thought. She only cared about Ethan. On the day he would have turned 10, she baked his favorite cake, vanilla with sprinkles, and left it on the kitchen table. She lit a candle and cried softly in the dark. She did the same every year. As time moved on, the tradition stayed. Christmas presents still appeared under the tree for Ethan. Birthday balloons were tied to the fence. Hope was all she had left. There were nights Karen dreamed of Ethan, sometimes as a little boy, sometimes as a grown man. In those dreams, he would smile, hold her hand, and say, "I'm okay, Mom." And then she'd wake up with tears on her pillow. The police eventually called the case inactive. Not closed, but shelved. They told her if anything new came up, they'd let her know. But deep down, Karen knew they had stopped looking. She never did. It was a quiet Sunday morning, 35 years after Ethan disappeared. Karen was sitting alone on her porch, sipping cold coffee and staring at the empty street. The world had moved on, but her pain had stayed. The photo of Ethan still hung by the front door, the last school picture she had of him from first grade, before picture day took him away. That same day, in a small town in Ohio, nearly 200 miles from Fairview, a retired school photographer named Frank Delaney was cleaning out his attic. He had boxes full of old film rolls, dusty equipment, and memories from decades of taking school photos. Most of it was junk. But one small metal tin caught his eye, a roll of film that had never been developed. Curious, Frank took it to a local photo shop. A few days later, the prints were ready. They were from October 1988, the same year Ethan had vanished. Frank remembered being called to Meadow Ridge Elementary that year to cover for a sick photographer. He smiled at the old images, rows of children with missing teeth and crooked ties. But then, one photo made him freeze. It was a class shot. 20 or so kids lined up in the school gym, smiling awkwardly for the camera. But in the back row, slightly out of focus, stood a little boy, wearing a bright blue sweater. His head tilted slightly, his smile soft, his eyes deep and unsure. Frank's heart skipped. He had seen that face before, somewhere. Rushed to his computer and searched for Missing Boy 1988 Meadow Ridge. Within seconds, Ethan Carter's poster appeared. It was him. Frank's hand shook as he dialed the number for the Fairview Police Department. I think I found something," he stammered. "A photo from the day Ethan Carter went missing. He's in it." When the picture reached Detective Molly Reyes, now in charge of cold cases, she stared at it for a long time. She compared it with Ethan's last known photo. The eyes, the hair, the blue sweater. There was no question that it was Ethan. It was the last known picture taken of him, seconds before he disappeared. The film had sat in a dark attic for over 3 decades, and now it was bringing light to a mystery long believed unsolvable. Detective Molly Reyes couldn't stop staring at the photo. It was blurry, old, and faded. But that boy in the back row, it had to be Ethan Carter. She pulled out the original missing person report from 1988 and laid it side by side with the new image. The resemblance was undeniable. She called Karen Carter immediately. When Karen answered the phone and heard the words, "We may have a new lead," her body froze. It had been so long since anyone from the police had called. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling, her voice barely a whisper. "What did you find?" Detective Reyes explained the photo. She promised Karen they were taking this seriously. This time, new tools were on their side. Back in 1988, there was no internet, no facial recognition. But now they had a chance. The case was officially reopened. The police sent the class photo to a digital forensics lab. Experts used facial recognition software to isolate the boy's features. They scanned the face across national databases, looking for any possible match. Days passed, then weeks. Every day, Karen waited by the phone like she used to. Every ring made her heart jump. Then the lab called. The software had found a high-probability match. A man named Daniel West, living in a small town in northern Illinois. No criminal record. No known connection to Fairview. But his facial features, especially the shape of his jaw and eyes, were nearly identical to a grown-up version of Ethan. Detectives tracked down Daniel and watched him from a distance. He was quiet, lived alone, and worked as a mechanic. He didn't stand out, but something about him, the way he carried himself, the way he smiled, felt familiar. They approached him carefully, explained the situation. Daniel was confused at first. He said he didn't remember much from his early childhood. said he'd been raised by an older couple who had both passed away years ago. He had always wondered why he had no birth certificate before age 8, but he had stopped asking questions long ago. Detectives asked him for a DNA sample. Daniel hesitated, then agreed. The test was sent to a lab. While they waited, Karen could barely breathe. She didn't want to get her hopes up, but deep down, a tiny voice whispered, "What if it's him? What if this is finally it?" And then the results came back. The man known as Daniel West was a 99.98% match to Karen Carter. He was Ethan, her Ethan. When the DNA test confirmed it, Karen collapsed to the floor in tears. For a moment, she couldn't speak. She just held the phone to her chest and sobbed. After 35 years of praying, crying, and never giving up, her baby was alive. But the joy quickly mixed with fear. Where had he been all this time? Who had taken him? Why? Detectives sat down with Ethan, or Daniel, as he had known himself all his life. They spoke gently, knowing that the truth he was about to learn would shatter everything he believed about his past. He told them that he had been raised by a couple named Howard and Delia West. They were older, too old to be his real parents, but they had always told him he was adopted after his real family gave him away. He had grown up confused, but eventually stopped asking questions. Delia was kind, quiet, and often sick. Howard was strict, cold, and never talked much. But as investigators dug deeper, a terrifying story began to unfold. Howard West had worked as a part-time janitor, and in 1988, for a short time he worked at Meadow Ridge Elementary School. No one remembered much about him. He was quiet, stayed in the background, and left the job not long after Ethan disappeared. He had access to the school, he knew the layout, he knew where the children lined up for pictures. Authorities now believe that on that morning, Howard waited near the hallway. When Ethan stepped away from the group, maybe to tie his shoe, or maybe someone called him softly, Howard took him. No one saw, no one heard. It happened in seconds. Ethan was likely taken out through a side door. No security cameras, no alarms. Just one man with a plan, and a child who had no idea what was happening. Howard and Delia moved to another state just weeks after the disappearance. They changed the boy's name, told neighbors he was their late niece's son. No one ever questioned them. There was no reason to. Ethan was too young to remember much. Over time, he accepted the lie. He had grown up never knowing who he really was. Delia died when he was 15. Howard passed a few years later. Ethan, now completely alone, has built a quiet life, unaware that a mother in another state was still holding onto his baby photo and praying for a miracle. That miracle had just arrived. Karen Carter had lived through 35 years of pain, but she never allowed herself to give up. Every birthday, she baked Ethan's favorite cake, vanilla with rainbow sprinkles. She would place a single candle on top, light it, and sit at the table alone, whispering, "This one's for you, sweetheart." The candles burned down, the tears fell silently, but she never stopped lighting them. Her friends had told her to move on, to heal. But how does a mother move on from her child? How does she heal when there's no goodbye, no grave, no answers? Karen never believed Ethan was gone forever. Even when years passed without a single clue, she kept his room clean, his clothes folded, and his favorite book by the bed. She would often stand by the window at night watching the street. Sometimes, she imagined a grown man walking down the sidewalk, someone who looked familiar but older. She would wonder, could that be Ethan? Her heart would beat faster, then break again when it wasn't him. There were dark moments too. Days when the pain became too heavy to carry. Times when she screamed into her pillow, asking God why this had happened to her baby. Why no one had seen. Why no one had stopped it. She would fall asleep holding Ethan's old teddy bear, soaked in tears, begging for just one more moment with her son. But even in those darkest moments, she never let go of hope. She kept a box under her bed, filled with every news clipping, every police report, every note anyone had ever written about Ethan. She read them often, not to torture herself, but to remind herself. He mattered. He's real. He's out there. And now, that hope had been rewarded. The day the detective called to say the DNA was a match, Karen didn't know whether to scream or collapse. Her hands shook, her knees buckled. She sat in silence for what felt like forever, clutching the photo of Ethan from 1988. The same one Sheedy looked at every day for 35 years. Her son was alive. Somewhere right now, he was breathing, smiling, maybe even wondering if his real mother still remembered him. She did, every second. And now, that unshakable hope, the one she carried alone for more than 3 decades, was finally leading her back to him. The reunion was set for a quiet Wednesday afternoon at the Fairview Police Department. No reporters, no cameras, just a mother and a son, walking into a moment they had both dreamed about, but never truly believed they would live to see. Karen arrived first. She wore a soft blue scarf, the same color as the sweater Ethan wore on picture day. Her hands trembled as she sat in the waiting room. Every breath felt like a lifetime. She stared at the door, heart pounding in her chest, tears already falling before it even opened. And then it did. The man who stepped in looked nothing like the little boy she lost, and yet everything about him felt familiar. His walk, his eyes, the way he looked around the room, uncertain but kind. It was Ethan. Her Ethan. For a moment, they just stared at each other. No one spoke. Then, without a single word, Karen stood up slowly, her lips trembling, and took a shaky step forward. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice cracking. He nodded, his eyes welled up with tears. "Mom," and that was it. They collapsed into each other's arms, crying so hard it shook their bodies. It wasn't quiet, it wasn't gentle. It was raw, full of every missing year, every sleepless night, every birthday spent apart. Karen held him like she'd never let go again. Ethan sobbed into her shoulder like a little boy, not a grown man, as if time had folded back onto itself. They stayed like that for a long time. No one in the room moved. Even the officers nearby had tears in their eyes. It wasn't just a reunion, it was a miracle. A broken heart being put back together, piece by piece. "I knew you were alive," Karen whispered into his ear. "I told them all, never gave up." Ethan pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "I don't remember much," he said, "but something inside me always felt like something was missing." Karen placed her hand on his cheek. "You were never missing," she said softly. "You were just waiting to be found." In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the years, not the pain, not the lies. Mother had her son again, a boy who had once disappeared without a trace, had finally come home. When the truth about Ethan's disappearance became public, the town of Fairview stood still. People who had once forgotten his name now whispered it in shock. Neighbors who had long ago moved away sent messages of disbelief. Old teachers cried. The story of the little boy who vanished on picture day had haunted them for decades. Now they finally had an answer. And the man responsible, he was already gone. Howard West, the man who stole Ethan and raised him under a lie, had died years ago. There would be no courtroom trial, no prison sentence, no confession, just silence. A silence that left behind anger, to deep, aching questions. Why did he do it? How could he take a child from his mother and live like nothing happened? Was it a sick plan? Was he trying to fix a hole in his own broken life by stealing someone else's joy? No one would ever know. But the law didn't stop there. Detectives launched a full investigation into Howard's life. They searched through old job records, bank statements, and letters. Nothing pointed to a larger plan or a group. It appeared he had acted alone. One moment, one decision, one stolen child. As for Karen, she didn't want revenge. She didn't ask for punishment. She said, "He took my baby, but I won't let him take another second of my life." Her focus was on healing, not hate. On rebuilding, not ruining. The town held a candlelight vigil for Ethan. Hundreds gathered at Meadow Ridge, the old school now shut down and boarded up. They placed flowers, photos, and letters at the gate. Children, now adults, who once shared Ethan's classroom, returned to honor him. They lit candles and watched as his first grade picture was projected onto the old brick wall. The smile that had once disappeared, now shining again. Karen stood beside her son that night, hand in hand, and Ethan, overwhelmed, whispered, "I don't deserve all this." She looked at him gently and replied, "You deserve the whole world. The healing would take time." Ethan had to learn about the life he lost, the birthdays he missed, the family that never stopped searching. But for the first time in years, there was peace. Not everything broken can be fixed. But sometimes, even after decades of darkness, the light finds its way back. Sometimes it takes just one moment to change everything. For Ethan Carter, that moment was a simple photograph. A blurry class picture buried in an attic for 35 years. Forgotten roll of film that no one thought mattered. But it did. It mattered more than anyone could have imagined. Because in that photo was a face. A lost smile. Missing boy who was never truly forgotten. That one image brought light back into a mother's life. It reopened a closed case. It proved that even the smallest pieces of the past can hold answers. The photo had no voice, no movement, just frozen faces and soft shadows. But it spoke louder than words, told the world. He was here, he was real, he mattered. And it reminded us of something else too, something even more powerful. Hope. Hope is what kept Karen Carter alive all those years. Hope is what made her leave the porch light on, what made her save every drawing, every birthday card, every dream. It would have been easy to let go, to give in, to stop believing. But she didn't. She held on. And because of that, because she never gave up, she got to hold her son again. This story is more than just about a missing child. It's about the strength of a mother's love, a quiet fight inside someone who refuses to stop hoping. It's about how time can't erase truth, and how, sometimes even after decades of silence, answers still find their way home. Ethan Carter's smile, once lost in time, has returned. And with it, healing, love, and a reminder that even in the darkest chapters of life, the light can still come back. If we just keep hoping, always. Life can be full of pain, mystery, and unanswered questions. But sometimes, the answers come when we least expect them. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of love, of a mother's strength, or of the miracles that still happen in this world, then please, subscribe to Unsolved Chronicles. Every week we bring you emotional, mysterious, and true stories that stay with you long after they end. Don't forget to turn on the bell icon so you never miss a single moment, because the next story could be the one that changes everything. And remember, never stop hoping. Even when the world goes quiet, hope still whispers. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.